like this, the buildup doesn't just happen in the gears, it's going to happen in the passageways as well, right? Hey guys, welcome back. Steve here with 6 Star Automotive. So today we're going to talk about the third fluid in our preventive maintenance series. Before we get started, please like, subscribe, and follow me as we learn about transmission fluid. So I've got one of the videos here that I show some of my customers. I figured I'd show you guys as well. So this is a very crude animation of what the inside of your transmission looks like. We've got the torque converter assembly here. We've got the gears and the different ratios you're going to have, and then the final drive down in here. So like we've talked about with the other fluids, transmission fluid is also very highly reliant on its additive packages, namely the detergents, the corrosion inhibitors, and the anti-foaming agents. So inside of your transmission, there's going to be things that look like this. You're going to have, this is a clutch pack. You've probably heard that before. So you're going to have friction discs and you're going to have steel discs, and they're all kind of sandwiched together, and then you'll have hydraulic pressure will be applied to one side, and that will push all these together. If you have nice clean fluid, this is actually going to be relatively easy for this to do its job. If you could imagine having fluid with a lot of carbon in it, or foam, or a lot of just debris from friction material breaking down over time, that can get in between those discs and cause them not to engage properly, or slip, or a lot of other things. I believe that I've read that about 75% of transmission failures are related to heat. The fluid overheating, the transmission overheating, and that causing it to internally fail. So one of the most important things to think about what the transmission fluid does is that it cools the transmission. As a transmission works, you have all this friction inside from bands and clutches engaging and disengaging. It creates a lot of heat, so that heat needs to be dissipated. If the transmission fluid is very dirty and old, it can be rather problematic when it comes to cooling the transmission properly. So getting that fluid out of there and getting it replenished with new fluid is really important to maintaining the longevity of the transmission. Like I've said before, we're really trying to keep these things running for as long as possible without major repairs. So when was the last time your transmission fluid was changed? So here's another video about the inside of a transmission. For those of you who know, this is obviously rather crude, but it's designed to be as simple as it possibly can be, but still kind of get the point across of the importance of what we're talking about. Let's take a look. So again, here's those bands and clutches. It shows fluid, clean fluid going through the passages, allowing those bands and clutches to open like they should. If we have a lot of buildup inside of the transmission like this, the buildup doesn't just happen in the gears, it's going to happen in the passageways as well, right? So then that could hinder the amount of pressure that you can get to the clutches and cause issues with slippage. I mean, we're going to have blockages like this, not necessarily really, but it is it's a good way of showing kind of what we're talking about, is that dirty fluid versus the clean fluid, and what it can actually do inside of that transmission. So why should I get my transmission serviced? So the main reason why you're going to want to get that transmission serviced is to avoid replacing the transmission, right? I mean, that's in the long run, that's the idea, is that we do these services to keep the fluid fresh, to keep the fluid doing its job of lubricating and cooling and cleaning. If that's all happening, then these transmissions will last quite a long time. I mean, there are some things like, towing, but generally speaking, with the kind of driving that most customers are going to do, it's really replacing that fluid is going to be the key to extending the life of that transmission as long as possible. So my goal in these videos is to try and keep things as simple as possible. I mean, there's a lot of complexity here, there's a lot of nuance, but really I'm just trying to let you know that you can trust me. Just like anybody would want a plumber they can trust, or a roofer that they can trust. I want to prove to you guys that you can trust that we know what we're doing, that we're here to make sure that you're going to be on the road safe. So I'm going to give you a bonus. So we're going to talk about transmissions and differentials at the same time. Not a whole lot of difference here other than the types of fluid that they take, but again, the anti-foaming agents and stuff like that are really important, those additive packages, which is why, and I'll show you kind of what we're looking at. So this is a modern vehicle. This is a pickup truck. You're going to have your engine here, transmission, and then this is the transfer case. The transfer case sends power to the rear axle and then also sends it back to the front axle if you have four-wheel drive. So if you don't have four-wheel drive, you're not going to have a transfer case. So inside most transfer cases, you're going to have an input shaft, gears, and then a large chain drive assembly. All that requires lubrication. You're going to have bearings and all kinds of stuff in here. And then what this does is, based on the inputs that you give it and what this shift motor does, it's either going to allow the front drive line to remain without a load and just spin freely, or it's going to lock that drive line in with that chain to the rear, and then that's how you kick in that four-wheel drive. So it's really important that these gears remain bathed in that type of fluid with how much load that they have to go through. As the fluid gets dirty, same kind of problem, right? We have the potential for overheating and risk inside the transfer case. If that happens, then you end up having the bearings will fail and they will start to disintegrate, and you'll start to see metal particles inside of the transfer case. Most transfer case failures that I've seen in my career are due to lack of fluid maintenance. I mean, some of them have happened due to large loads and things like that, but the majority of cases are just simply because of lack of maintenance. And that's one thing we're trying really hard here, is to make sure that you're aware of that so that you can make an informed decision. So the last thing we're going to talk about is differentials. Not much different than your transfer case. So what the differential does is it allows your inside and outside wheels to spin at different rates while you're turning. That's the main thing. I mean, that and the fact that your drive line is going to come in straight, and then you need the actual rear axle to spin at a 90-degree angle. So here's a rather complicated differential, but you have your input, your drive line here, and then you've got the differential assembly. This is actually a limited slip type differential with clutches inside. And this kind of shows you the complexity of what they can look like on modern vehicles. You've got your clutch pack inside. So as you can see in this illustration, it's actually easier on this side to see. You've got your pinion gear here, the ring gear here, and then your tapered roller bearing here. So it's the same thing on this side, but you can't really see all that because of how much carbon is kind of built up inside of those gears. So again, it can't really do its job very well if it's this dirty. So we want to try and keep this differential as clean as possible. It sounds like I'm beating a dead horse here, right? I mean, it's really the same thing with all this stuff. Is as those fluids break down, they stop doing their job, they stop lubricating, they stop cooling, and then we're going to have problems. We want to stay in the maintained category, not in the neglected category. All right, guys, that's it for this episode. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And thank you for watching this video. Again, please like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. And come on by to experience the 6-star difference for yourself. So I'm here editing this video, and I realized that there was one thing I wanted to talk about that I didn't quite get to. So one objection that people have is that they don't want to do a transmission flush because they think that it will damage their transmission. So from my experience, flushing a transmission is not going to damage it. So if your transmission is already right on the brink of failure and it's basically only functioning because of the friction material particles that are still suspended in the fluid, by removing all of that old fluid with all that friction material inside of it and replacing it with new fluid, you can actually cause the transmission to slip. It's not that the flush has made the transmission fail, it's that the transmission was basically already failing. The only time that I think that could be a justified claim is if the wrong fluid was used. So that can definitely cause a transmission to fail. But if you're using the correct fluid, and that's our job to make sure that happens, then there shouldn't be a problem.